Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Zero, we are here today because we decided to do a sci-fi movie this week. And I chose the movie Dune, directed by Denis Villenueve, starring Timothee Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Zendaya, Oscar Isaac, Jason Mamoa, and Stellan Skarsgard. We were both interested in seeing this, and of course, because it's a long movie, we kept choosing other films, but I thought now would be a great time to actually start watching this. I guess the first thing I gotta ask is, did you read the book, or did you see the David Lynch movie?
Actually, I was assigned the book in high school, and I quite loved it.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is going to make this review very interesting then, because I have never read the book. I am one of these people, these weirdos, who do not like to read narratives. I don't mind reading like a nonfiction book or a book about like research or journalistic stuff like that. I have no problem with that, but if you give me a book and a story, I can't do it. I'm just that way for some reason. And I know I miss a bunch of really good stories that way, but that's unfortunately the way I am at this point. That's great. Oh man, I'm gonna have a lot to ask you in spoilers then. Do you remember a lot of the book? Did a lot of it come back at you when you were watching the movie? And what were your thoughts as you were watching the movie when you had the book in mind?
Interestingly enough, I haven't had a chance to go back and read the book ever since the high school book report assignment that I got dropped. And it was funny because, of course, the high school teacher I had really didn't want us reading like stuffy literature books. She was just like, I get it, just book reports suck, but I'm gonna level with you guys as long as you work with me. And my deal is, you let me know which genres you're into, and I will try to find some interesting books for you to read. And for me, I was a big sci-fi and fantasy person. So it was always just like any sort of like high fantasy novels and sci-fi stuff. I just remember one day she was just like, do you have any curiosity on like interfaction politics and stuff like that? And I was like, and of course, high school kid hearing the word politics, you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
And of course she was just like, I'm gonna ask you to take a leap of faith with me. I'm gonna assign you Dune. No, just when I said the word interfactional politics, you're probably thinking, oh god, this is gonna be a stuffy book, ain't it? But she was just like, I assure you, once you get through chapter 1, you're probably gonna be pulled in. I was like, okay. If you think that I'll be roped in by chapter 1, I'll give it a leap of faith. And I'm so thankful I did, because just the entire book was engaging. I was like, oh god, just one hell of a book. And then of course, just after I'd submitted the report, she was like, well, I'm glad you took a leap of faith. I was like, yeah, I'm glad too.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people love this book. And but when the 84 version of course, I was like 2 when that came out. When the 84 version of Dune came out, I read a lot where a lot of people were kind of disappointed by it and disappointed with the vision that Lynch had. If you don't know who David Lynch is does some weird-ass movies. It's now considered a camp classic of sorts, but a lot of people who are fans of the book were kind of disappointed by that movie. But when this was announced, and they've been trying to remake Dune constantly in the past few years. There have been studios that have been trying to do it as a video game. There have been miniseries. There was one with William Hurt that happened in 2000. They've been trying to do this for a long time. And Denis Villenueve, I guess, got the capital enough. I don't know if Frank Herbert's still alive or it's his estate. Decided that he would be the right director to do this movie to a certain extent, I guess. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to hear what you think about this movie specifically, since you have read the book. So, you want to get into it? You want to just get into the review of Dune?
Yeah. And it's kind of funny that you made the video game mentions, because last year there was the RTS game that came out,
Spice Wars,
that revolved around the Spice War trading and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just, if there are any gamers who listen to the movie podcast, I would say if you like Dune and you like real-time strategy, check out Dune Spice Wars, because apparently, if I remember right, the reception was actually pretty good, albeit a bit on the quiet side, but I think that is what it is with real-time strategy games.
So let's get into the review of Dune, the 2021 sci-fi epic directed by Denis Villenueve. Okay, the first thing that I think this movie did really well was create a sense of space and a sense of place in this movie. They did a fantastic job making this world feel lived in. I guess real is not really the word, but definitely it did not feel like a movie set or just like the desert that in any other like world in the country or whatever. It really felt like its own world in this movie.
And it's kind of interesting that you mention how things are set up to show a sense of scale and everything, because like you've got shots where just it's extremely wide to kind of show you just how grandiose like a certain thing is. Like when you see large ships landing, just the camera shot is just set up just in a sense that give you kind of a sense of perspective. You're just like, whoa, holy cow, that's a lot of freaking ships. But at the same time, where you have like some of the indoor scenes where it's like very personal or it involves like the Atreides family, they're very, very closed in and feel almost a sense of intimacy to them, I guess you could say. So yeah, just the sense of space was just fantastic.
Like that was the one thing I was a little worried about with this movie, because from what I've heard of people who enjoy the book specifically, I don't know, is there only one book or are there multiple books of Dune?
So Dune is a universe in its own. So you've got Dune, which was the first book, then you've got Children of Dune, and so on and so forth. So there are several books in the universe of Dune, to be honest. So this one, this movie covers basically the first half of the novel.
That was like the one thing I was a little afraid about with this movie, because it did look gorgeous to watch, but I was always afraid of there was going to be something in the movie that made you realize it was a movie, or that the world they came up with, I guess the locations that they used, oh, that clearly is X, or that's clearly Y, or whatever. And it definitely felt like they were in that world throughout this entire movie. So I really liked the visual tableau that they had and the use of colors and architecture that they had in this movie specifically. I definitely really enjoyed the look of the film when it comes to not only the way the sets worked, but also in the direction and cinematography. The use of color that they did in this movie, when they're outside, when they're indoors, was very effective in this, specifically. Because like you mentioned how the Atreides house was very closed in and it felt claustrophobic a little. I definitely felt that throughout the entire film in this. It kind of matches the feeling of the main character, where he is going to have to be responsible for a kingdom at certain points. And I guess it signifies what his future might be to a certain extent. It was very effective in this. It's especially effective when you see scenes with the Baron. Like the Baron is like one of the most visually striking characters in this movie. And it also has, I think, the best performance in this. You have this character who clearly is made to be evil, but is evil in such a grotesque way that it's almost clown-like. Like in a lesser movie, in the way it's directed, it could have looked at as clown-like a little bit, but it actually is really effective, not just because of the performance, but just how the colors of which the character presides and the costumes they give him is just really effective in this. I mean, for someone who's read the book, what did you think?
It was kind of interesting because in my mind, it was respectful, but had its own artistic vision as well, too, which I imagine there's some people who are a bit more hardcore in the novel who will likely disagree with me. But again, I'm not the most hardcore Dune fan, so just all I can say is just there's not really much I can do to appease those.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into performances in Dune Part 1. It is Part 1. I think the main performance we should talk about is Timothee Chalamet, who played Paul in this movie. I thought he was good. It's not his best performance, but it is a pretty good performance by him. This is the thing I'm going to have a problem with in the review throughout the entire time, is that this movie was very clearly a Part 1. They, of course, said that in the movie, but the thing with movies that have like a trilogy, or they have a number of movies to do an overarching story, is that most movies, when they do that, they have a story within the movie that gives the movie its beginning, middle, and end. All the Harry Potter movies did it. I think to a certain extent the Lord of the Rings movies did it. Godfather, whatever. Even though they are a trilogy of movies and they're having an overarching plot, there is a story within that story that contains that entire movie. And I think this is Dune's big weakness, is that even though I think it's a very good movie, it is very clearly just one half of a movie. It's one half of a story. And I think that becomes a problem towards the end of the movie, especially, and when you're watching the movie. But anyway, Timothee Chalamet, what were your thoughts?
I thought he was all right. It was kind of interesting seeing sort of like his portrayal of Paul going through like the different ranges of emotions, especially when you get into like sort of the later part of this movie and everything, where things start to take a very serious turn. I didn't think it was like exceptional, but it was by no means terrible either.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And his performance might get better as the second movie rolls around, and Rebecca Ferguson's too. I actually like Rebecca Ferguson as an actor. I kind of liked her in this, but you don't get to see her performance really get good until like the end of the movie. Is there a performance that stood out to you?
Can't really say that there was anyone who sort of stood out more than anyone else.
No? Okay. So like Oscar Isaac as the Duke, Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, Javier Bardem as Stilgar. I mean, I'll give one that I think stood out. It's not a big standout, but it definitely took my attention when he was on. It was Stellan Skarsgard as the Baron. It's a different direction that he's going in this, even though it is kind of a standard villain role, because he is 100% meant to be the evil guy in this movie, but he works very well in that role, especially like in the scene where we'll get into spoilers. We'll get into spoilers of that, but I think Skarsgard's performance in this was actually pretty good in this. I agree with you. Nothing really stands out when it comes to performances in this. They don't hurt the movie either in this, but I'm gonna hope as when the second movie comes out that maybe like Chalamet, Ferguson, Zendaya, Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård has more to work with performances when the part 2 comes out. That's what I'm going to hope on that. We talked a little about direction. We talked about direction and cinematography in the beginning. I guess writing is probably the only thing to talk about in this. I know like people are huge fans of Dune. This kind of felt like standard sci-fi fare to a certain extent. It kind of had a Warhammer feel to me a little bit, like the oppressiveness and the feeling of just like gloom throughout the entire movie and the way it was written made me feel that way a little bit. But other than that, it's kind of standard, and really the only thing that I think bumps it up towards other sci-fi films is its look. It's the way it's shot. I think that's really the only thing that I think that really stands out amongst other sci-fi.
The writing was a sci-fi movie, but I think in my mind, it definitely didn't tread new ground, which some people might think that's a good thing, especially just with some of the more recent sci-fi movies and TV shows, sort of trying to shake things up a bit and try to feel like that they're doing something new. But at the same time, in my mind, I think the movie is almost respectful to the source material, the original Dune novel. So it's not to say that, you know, it's like amazing writing or anything, but as far as movies go or anything, but I think there just feels like there's a sense of respect for the source material. And I know some sci-fi nerds probably know what I'm talking about with like some of the more recent movies and TV shows, just kind of shaking things up, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I know on our Discord channel recently we were talking about the last Star Wars movie in the end trilogy and just how it just shook up way too much stuff, and the director who was just in charge of the movie was just kind of left with this bag of scraps and told, yeah, do something with it. And it was just like, ooh, yeah, this is kind of rough. And then just the last of the end trilogy was what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. We won't get into that problem with that specifically, because there are people, apparently, I didn't know this, that are fans of Rise of Skywalker, which kind of surprises me. Yeah, like, it is pretty standard sci-fi fare. I guess a part of me is a little disappointed, because after hearing so many people praise Dune, I thought I would hear, like, oh, this must be something exceptional and amazing, and I'm watching and going, oh, okay, maybe I was wrong. But I will say, like, the writing is not bad, but and that might be because they're keeping to the source material, which is fine. There's really nothing that I look at it and go, oh, that's really exceptional writing or pacing, whatever. It just is standard fare at that point. It's fine. It's good. Again, the thing that I think stands out to me with Dune would probably be the look and the direction and the cinematography. So, okay. You want to get into spoilers?
Yeah.
All right, let's get into spoilers for Dune Part 1, the 2021 film directed by Denis Villenueve. If you have not seen it, you can stop here and come back when you're ready. We'll get the spoilers for Dune in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like I said with the performances, the big problem I'm going to have with this movie is that it's incomplete. And I get it. It's part 1 of a movie. Other trilogies have done this. But the issue that I have specifically with this movie, and I had the same problem with Kill Bill Volume 1, okay? Because people are going to say, what about Kill Bill? Like, Kill Bill Volume 1, I said they had the same problem. But in regards to how they do this movie particularly, is that it didn't seem to have a storyline within the storyline. I don't know if you ever watched the Harry Potters or Lord of the Rings, but within each movie, they would have a storyline in that movie that would be running, while the overarching storyline, which with Harry Potter is him going against Voldemort, or with Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship going to Mount Doom to get rid of the ring, they would have that overarching story and give it a satisfying conclusion. Whereas this one, it's just that overarching story. Because of that, the ending and the pacing just felt incomplete. It kind of felt like I was seeing the first act. It's a long first act, or I'll be fair, the first act and half of the second act. That's what it felt like to me in this. So a part of me doesn't even want to review this, because I want to see part 2 to see how it is completely, but we can't do that. But that's my big issue with this, is that I don't feel I've gotten a complete sense of what this story and what this movie is. When it comes to spoilers, if you want to talk certain things, that's great. Just know that I'm probably be a little more wishy-washy on this.
I mean, I can definitely understand where you're coming from. For me, it seemed like that there was more political setup for most of this movie, and then just all the fun action stuff starts to happen towards the latter part of the movie. And of course, it all comes to an end when things start to get really, really interesting and dramatic, where you get to the rising action part of the storyline. It's just like especially when just Paul wins the duel against Jamis, and then his mother, Lady Jessica's just like dude, we got to get off this world. And then of course this is when just the leader of the Fremen tribe, he ends up kind of pushing back, and he's just like, no, just he participated in this ritual duel. He's now one of us. Stilgar ends up kind of going, okay, let's start marching back to camp and everything. And of course, just Lady Jessica's just kind of freaking the fuck out, going, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And then of course he kind of goes back to the thing that in the beginning his dad was just like, yeah, maybe we were sent here to die, but just I still think that there's a chance to find power in Arrakis, and I think the key to our power is sand power, to form an alliance with the Fremen. And of course, just you see them starting to walk through the desert and everything, and then of course just Paul sees this awe-inspiring sight of one of the Fremen just taming one of the sandworms and just ripping around, and then he kind of says the one word that his dad had said right before they were moving off to Arrakis, and he's like, sand power. And then he's just kind of awestruck by the sight of a sandworm just being tamed and ridden on by one of the Fremen.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, damn it. Right when you just see things starting to get real good, the movie just cuts off.
Yeah. It makes me curious about watching the David Lynch one from '84 and see what he had to cut in order to make the film what it was. I think the '84 version is about 2.5 hours long. I'm not entirely sure, but it makes me really curious as to what he did in that movie. And I've seen clips of it, and it looks pretty campy, to say the least. But it's definitely after I see part 2. I think I might give that a shot. In that end, you're right about the political intrigue. That's what most of the first half, maybe like the first 2/3 of the movie is, and it is kind of interesting until with me you realize that, and they might go into it more as the movie goes on in part 2. The overarching leader is the Emperor. And is it that the Emperor just has no character or nothing represented in the book at all? It just seems like it's about these vassals who are fighting each other to a certain extent. Is that what the main story is?
Yeah, essentially just the Emperor feels threatened by House Atreides. Mm-hmm. So basically, this whole assigning House Atreides the planet of Arrakis as their fiefdom is sort of like a setup to essentially exterminate the entire clan. It does seem like it's just a bunch of the vassals fighting. Just you don't really get much insight on the Emperor. You see like some emissaries of the Emperor, like in the beginning, where they're asking Leto Atreides to sign off that he will be taking the Emperor's call to take over Arrakis and everything. And then of course you've got Harkonnen, Baron Harkonnen, just sort of plotting in the background under the blessing of the Emperor. But yeah, just you don't see a glimpse of the Emperor. You don't hear much about the Emperor. You just know that the Emperor's sort of pulling the puppet strings in the background, and that's about it. But yeah. I think I read somewhere for Dune Part 2, the Emperor should be playing a much more prominent role.
Okay, that's interesting then. Hard for me to rate something when I don't have the whole thing involved in there. Even with the movie the way it is right now, it felt incomplete. When I watch a Harry Potter movie, you would have the whole story and it felt like a complete story and movie, but then there was the overarching storyline, and that would make the whole trilogy or the whole set of movies feel as a whole thing, but still each subsequent part still felt like a whole story. This just doesn't feel like a whole story to me. And I think that's the main issue I'm kind of having here. Specifically with spoilers.
To your mention about sort of getting a vibe of the Warhammer 40k universe, there was one scene that depicts exactly that. It's when you see the Sardaukar being blessed and consecrated by the blood of exsanguinated convicts, and you see like a bunch of these convicts that are just kind of laid in an inverted position, their throats being slit with the blood just draining down into like this collection area, and you see these priests just going around just collecting the blood in containers and then just going and marking all the Sardaukar soldiers with like blood on their foreheads and everything. I was like, whoa, geez, that is some real cruel and just twisted stuff, and this is right out of the Warhammer 40k style of lore right here.
I think that's what the one thing that it reminded me of, absolutely.
With regards to Timothee Chalamet's performance and everything, it was kind of interesting seeing the range of emotions he goes through, especially kind of like in the beginning, he's just kind of in this like apathetic, why should I care sort of a mood. He's still kind of a kid in the beginning and everything. And then, of course, as he gets kind of thrust into this whole thing of, you've got Bene Gesserit powers and we need to see if you're just some sort of inhuman monster, sort of the stakes start to rise. And then you get to the one scene where just they're escaping their compound on Arrakis, just being completely raided by Harkonnen's forces and everything. And of course, they try to escape off and they end up in a tent. And the tent is just swarming with spice in it and everything. And of course, just Paul's just losing his mind and everything, just seeing like horrific visions of things to come and all this other stuff. And just he has kind of an emotional breakdown and just kind of freaks out on his mom about it, going, "You fucking doomed me. You doomed me into this like weird weird situation, and God, why did you do this to me and everything. So it was kind of interesting seeing the wide range of emotions that his character went through and everything.
Chalamet is a good enough, I think, a really good actor where he can pull all that off and still make that character sympathetic. And then I think that's a good thing about Chalamet in this role too, is that you're right. He went from like not like a spoiled brat, but a privileged kid who didn't care about anything to then go through this character arc to a certain extent and still come off believable that he is either changed or he has that drive to do what his father came here to do. So that's true. I do like his performance in that specific case. Okay, let's get into our final thoughts. This is hard for me because, like I said throughout the review, the story's incomplete. And the movie I don't think did any effort at all to make a story within the story. Now, some of you might actually say, oh, actually, what happened with Duke, the Duke Atreides, and after that would be a story complete, right? Like, not really, because the whole thing was about Paul to a certain extent. You might disagree with me on that one, but I still feel like there wasn't a story to keep me hung up while wondering what the whole story was about. I'll give it 3 stars at this point. I did like it. I did enjoy it. I thought it was visually compelling. It was entertaining. I just can't give it more than that because I don't know what else happens in the end of this movie. I might come back after I see 2 and raise the rating up. I may not, but at this point, I think 3 stars is all I'm going to give it at this point.
I'm probably a little bit more on the positive side, probably a 75%, but I think most of it is just due to the fact that the movie seems like it feels respectful to the source material, and just the cinematography is just plain excellent. And as a person who values visual presentation a lot in media, I think the director of photography really, really did their homework on this one.
Yeah.
Especially with just trying to set up a mood and a vibe just depending on the situation. Like when they're out in the sand fields, just you've got these wide camera shots of just tons of rolling dunes and just machinery just doing their thing, or like when you've got the sandworms just like ripping through the dunes and everything. Again, just wide shot, and you're just seeing sand being turned up all over the place while these worms just burrow through just miles and miles and miles of sand. And then of course kind of the real personal and intimate scenes between Paul and the Atreides family. Just they're in very, very close up, almost kind of claustrophobic sort of feeling shots, but they give you kind of a sense of intimacy. All the cinematography is just plain excellent, with just sort of setting the scene, setting the mood, trying to get the audience to feel a certain way. And I just think it's excellent. The acting's good. It's not terrible. It's not exceptional. It's just good. That's kind of where I am with that. And yeah, the story, I can definitely sympathize with you on the story, because most of the movie is just kind of political intrigue. And of course, just if you don't find political intrigue fascinating, then yeah, you're probably going to feel like you're being bored to hell by the first 2/3 of the movie. But yeah, just once you get to the last third of the movie, that's where all the action starts. That's where things get interesting. And then right when they start to get interesting, they just pull the plug on you and just like, oh, that's it. That's part 1. We'll see you later when we get part 2 done.
Yeah. I don't mind political intrigue. In fact, some stories are really good with political intrigue. Like, I would look at the Game of Thrones show, TV series that happened. Like, the political intrigue is probably one of the most interesting things about the show. I guess, like, part of the political intrigue is that you have to have the payoff in the end, and there's just no payoff, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll find out in part 2, essentially. So you're going to give it a 75%. I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, good movie. If you're interested in it, definitely give it a shot. But I just can't get past the fact that it feels incomplete. Okay, Zero. So here's what's happening for the next week. Thursday, you're filling in for Kim, and we're going to watch the Kevin Smith movie Clerks 3, starring Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson. I'm sorry. I just want to say that. And you, the crazy person that you are, decided, you know what I'll do? I'll just buy the disc. I'm like, oh God, why? Just why? But apparently you got it cheap, right?
Yeah, it was just a couple bucks more than doing a digital rental, and it's actually probably better this way too, because if it ends up being one of those that's just hard to watch, then instead of with a rental where you get nagged to death with like periodic emails, hey, you haven't finished that movie, you got X amount of time, and getting the push notifications from your phone and your tablet going, hey, clock's ticking on this movie you rented. And I was just like, yeah, you know what, just fuck it. I'll just go ahead and just pick up the hard copy that comes with a free digital code in the box, and it's only a couple bucks more than just doing a rental anyways, and it's cheaper than doing just a full outright purchase on any of the digital storefronts anyhow. So, just whatever, no big deal. And I'm keeping my expectations down in the garbage, so
yeah.
So that way I don't overhype myself and all that, because I enjoyed Clerks 1. Clerks 2 I thought was okay, even though I quite liked Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, just 3, it just seems like the jury is completely split on two ends. So I'm just saying, all right, well, this should be interesting.
Yeah. So we're going to watch that. I'm a movie sicko. Even if I hate the movie I'm watching, I watch it till the end. That's just how I am. Anyway, so we're watching that for Thursday. Well, Friday. We're going to record it Friday, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I've got to work pretty late tomorrow.
No, that's perfectly fine. So we're going to record that Friday. We'll probably have that out on Saturday. Next Tuesday, we're going to record an episode. We're going to stick with sci-fi, and we've decided on another Denis Villenueve movie, and that's Arrival, starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner. I love Amy Adams. Let me just say that right off the bat. I think Amy Adams is a great actress. I love seeing her in movies. I love her performances, so this is a treat for me. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm excited. I think you're interested, or did I just throw this on you?
Oh, I mean, it seems interesting.
Okay.
So, yeah, just definitely curious on it.
Okay. So, yeah, we'll be watching Arrival for Tuesday. So, all right, well, that is the end of Capital Games Movie Club this week for me and Zero. Tune in next time, where on the next episode, we are reviewing Clerks 3. And then on Tuesday, we'll be reviewing the movie Arrival. Until then, I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
We'll talk to you next time. Bye.